I've got another one of our instructors, Mark Honecker. If you were here last time, welcome back. Appreciate you coming back. Usually when people hear me the first time, they don't come back. So it's kind of rare if you were here before and here again. We've got a very short time and a lot to cover. The way that I thought I would do this today is to cover some of the questions that were sent in and some of the problems that people have been having that they emailed in from last time. And then I'll also try and cover a little bit more on graphing because we didn't get a chance to get into the graphing function last time. And then any other questions or concerns that people may have, I'll try and cover those as well. Mark Honecker is going to be keeping an eye on the chat box, so if you do have a question pertinent to what we're doing, feel free to type it in the chat box, and he'll try and relay that to me, or he'll jump in there and try and answer it as best as he can. One of the questions that came in, though, that's probably on the top of everybody's mind is why a new CRIS? Someone said, why did we do this? The old one was a brilliant program. I agree. The old one was a brilliant program. Mark and I both miss info analysts dearly. We're not the decision makers. We're just the trainers. But bottom line is the older system was getting too difficult to maintain. It was a client-side application, meaning that it had to be installed on everybody's local computer. And the Air Force's policy is that we're not doing that anymore, that systems and applications need to be web-based, and basically the PMO was told you need to come up with a web-based application, and so they worked with the FMO, and this is what we got. It had to be done quickly, so while there's not as many neat bells and whistles in CRIS as there used to be, it is coming along quite nicely. The folks at RightPad at Dayton are making a lot of headway. They are continually adding improvements and tweaking the software to get the best possible tool out there for the FMers around the world. So, but that is why we have to go to a new CRIS. Basically, the old one was just too hard to maintain, too manpower intensive, and the Air Force was telling us to go to web-based. So hopefully that was covered. Let's see, a couple of other things we were asked to get into, and this kind of continues from last time, so I'm not going to go through all the navigation and stuff that I did last time. But one of the questions does tie into navigation. Someone was curious as to how they stop the news banners from sliding across the screen. I've done a little research into that, and there really is no way to stop it. You do have, and I'm going to click on my screen, the top right-hand gear icon. It's the user preferences icon. I'm mousing over it now. I'm going to click that icon, and you do have a selection box for how long should notifications stay open. Personal preference, I like mine about 7 seconds. That gives me long enough to see it. If it's short, I'll be able to read it. If I can't read it all, I can always go to my news and read it from there. But you can shorten it down to as little as 3 seconds if you wanted to. That still may bother you. I know the person was asking how they could stop it altogether. You know, there is no 0-second option, unfortunately. Maybe that's a suggestion you would want to submit through the help desk to the FMO, you know, and have them put a 0 option in there. But you can change the time, at least by going to your user preferences. A couple of other questions. We're actually going to have to get into the system, and one of them is a very good one. It comes up all the time when we are teaching, and that basically is, how can I change a query, run and get results without overwriting an old query? In other words, how can I save a new query? That is a little complicated process. Unfortunately, right now there is no save as function in CRIS. the only button you have is an actual save button. But I'm going to walk you through the process of how you can get a Save As option. It's kind of a workaround that we use here at the Ephiso, and it'll probably help you out a lot, and I think it will answer the question. So I'm going to go into My Reports. I'm going to just left-click the My Reports tile on the screen. And someone had asked me to click slower, so I'm going to try and do that. I get pretty fast, and I realize there is a lag out there in the Internet, so I'll try and click a little bit slower. I have a query here. It's a DSR perspective query, and it's my ODL, my Open Document Listing. And it's for RCCC 301-700. Okay, and I just picked that one at random. It's got some good data in there. I'm not meaning to pick on anybody, but I put in the name of that query, 301-700 DSR ODL. So I'm going to left-click that, and it's going to run the query, and here are my results. Okay, and they're in collapsed form. It's in the cube. I talked about this last time. I know it's in the cube because I have that little cube symbol up there. If I needed to expand this, I can just right-click on the screen and select Expand, and it will expand and show me my full query. But now let's say that I have a second RCCC. Okay, here's the problem. If I edit this report, and I'm just going to right-click on the screen, and it'll bring up the little menu. Give it a second or two for everybody to see that. I right-clicked, it brings up the menu. I'm going to go down and select Edit Report. Okay, Edit Report. That takes me to the screen where I can make my edits. I'll go to the RCCC field, and let's just say for training purposes that my alternate RCCC is 301-766. Well, here's the problem. If I change this to 30766 and I click Save, it's the only option I have is cancel or save. I click Save, it's going to run the results because I accessed the edit screen from the results. So when I click Save, it takes me back to the results. So here are the results, and I'll go ahead and expand all. For that second RCCC, if you notice the RCCC column, it's my 301-766, my second one. But my title up here still says 301-700. And unfortunately, when I clicked the Save button, not only did CRIS run the reports, but it also saved it, and it overwrote the old one that I had. If I go back to My Reports, I'm going to click the little icon, top right-hand side, the little icon that says My Reports. I'm going to left-click that, go back to My Reports. Here's the one that says it's 301-700, but if I right-click and edit it and open that up, you'll see the RCCC is, in fact, that 766. So it actually overwrote it. So here's how you solve that. I'm going to change this back to 700, just like it's supposed to be, and I'm going to click Save. Okay, so now I've got it back in My Reports, and the title matches the RCCC, so everything is fine here in the reports. This is the one I want. So what I'm going to do now is export this. I'm going to right-click my original CRIS report. You get the little menu that pops up. I'm going to go down to Export, and I want to export the definition. The definition is the actual query. If you were using InfoAnalyst, it's the same as your QDF, Query Design file, that you used to get. So I right-clicked, I go to Export, I'm going to click Definition. Screen is going to come up. I've got a folder on my desktop that says My CRIS Stuff. So I'm going to open that folder, and I'm going to save this report. This is my 301-700 DSR ODL, and I'll click Save. Notice I get the little news flash up there in the top right-hand side. Should last for about 7 seconds, and then it goes away. So what I've done, I've taken my original report and I've actually saved it out there onto my desktop. Maximum number of reports in my reports, good question, not that I'm aware of. We haven't found it, and we've had quite a few in there. So I've got my report saved. I'm going to go to New Report. That's the little plus icon that's up there on the screen. So I'm going to click the plus and give Chris a second or two to come in. And I'm going to import report file. What I want to do is go out there and find that report that I just saved and import it. So I click the import report file. It remembers where I was, my desktop, my CRIS stuff, so it remembers all of that. There's the one that I just saved. I'm going to click it and click open. It brings me into the edit screen. Now, a couple of neat things happened when I just imported that. First of all, notice up here at the title, it put a 2 in parentheses. CRIS saw that I already had a report with the same name in my reports. So it added the number 2, meaning that, hey, Bob, this is the second report with the same name. So that means I can delete that number 2 up there. I can change the title for my new RCCC. So now it says 301766 DSR ODL. I'm going to click down here in the reports, the designer area, the query area, change my RCCC that I'm looking for. And then when I click Save, it is not going to overwrite my original report. Because I imported it, not only did it change the title up at the top by adding that 2 up there, it also created a second report for me. So when I click Save, it will take me into my reports. Hopefully, there we go. And now I have my 301700 DSR ODL and my new one, 301766 DSR ODL. Now, I know that doesn't exactly answer the question. The person who asked it was wanting to not save it at all. You know, hey, I just want to look at something. I don't ever want to run this report again. Unfortunately, anytime you edit a report, it is going to overwrite the one that is in my reports, unless you do the import like I just walked through. If it's one you never need again, you can just simply right-click on it, just like I just did, and then notice you have a delete option that is there, so I could just click delete. It's going to ask me if I'm sure, so it's asking me to confirm it, and I click OK, and it's gone. That is a little frustrating for some folks. You know, unfortunately, there's just no way that you can run a report and not save it. And the only way you can do a save as right now is by exporting the definition and then re-importing that report. And then that process does work very well. If there will be a save as in the future, I really don't know. I'm not aware that they're working on one right now. You know, they probably have higher priority stuff that they're trying to work on. Another person asked about how they can view an entire query output all at once. Can the view be made smaller? It can, sort of. I'm going to go ahead and run that ODL report again. So I'm going to left click on my 301700. There's my results. I'm going to right click and expand. Okay, and that'll expand the results. And if you notice, it doesn't all fit on the page. I've got a column that's kind of half cut off on the right-hand side. You have a couple of options when this happens. These columns can be reduced. So just like if you were in Excel, so for example, that my very first column, FY4 character, I can mouse over that top vertical bar till I get the double arrow on my mouse, and then hold and drag that column over some, and I can do that to the next column and to the next column, you know, and as often as it takes in order to get my full view, okay? That's one option. Another option that you have, and I'm not sure if this is common in all Internet Explorer browsers. The one that I'm using here, it is. If you notice down in the bottom right-hand corner, and I'm hovering over it with my mouse, there is a change zoom level option. So if I needed to reduce what's on the screen a little bit, I can click that. It defaults to 100%, but I can change that to 75, and it will reduce what's on the screen. And so you can see that happening now, and that will give me a little bit more visibility. By the same token, if you're giving some type of a presentation, like what we do in our classrooms a lot, we actually increase that magnification up to about 125 or so. That way people sitting in the back of the room can see the screen better. So that option, it's not a function of CRIS, but it is a function of your Internet Explorer browser. Okay, so that's two ways that you can get more information on the screen. There is a third way, and that way happens more commonly in the data sheet. So I'm going to convert this view over to a data sheet. I'm going to right-click on the screen, and I will go down and select View As. You can see the little menus opening up, and then go to Data Sheet. In the data sheet, you have the capability to hide any columns that you don't necessarily need to see. So, for example, looking at my results, my BA, my budget activity, is the same all the way down. It's 0-1. So, you know, I already know that. So, wow, I could just right-click. I could go to Hide BA MFP Pay Code, and I could select that menu option. So then that hides that column. Maybe I don't need to see my fund code and my FY. I know it's all FY. You know, I've already looked at the FY. I've got 2010, 2013, 2014 data. You know, maybe I'm not too concerned about that right now, so I could hide the FY column. I could hide my fund code column by just right-clicking and select Hide. That gives me more room on the screen, okay? Now you can unhide those selectively. So now as I'm looking at this data, I might say, hey, wait a minute, I need that I need the FY back, but I don't need all those other columns back. Well, if I right-click anywhere on the screen, notice I get an unhide option. I can unhide all with that first selection, but all I need to do is see the FY again. So I'm going to go down to FY4 character and click on that one, and that brings back my FY without bringing back all of the other columns. So in the data sheet, you get a little bit more flexibility as far as hiding columns. You can hide columns in the cube. The reason why I didn't do it there is because you can only hide the dollar amount columns in the cube. You cannot hide the other values. For example, I cannot hide my EEC, my RCCC, the PEC, document number, stuff like that in the cube. I can only hide dollar values. The data sheet that we went to now allows you the opportunity to hide any column that you don't necessarily need to see. So because the data sheet gives me more flexibility on hiding columns, I wanted to demonstrate that here in the data sheet. Okay? Those are all the main questions that were emailed in ahead of time, plus it covered some things that I wanted to demonstrate anyway, such as the save as workaround and hiding and showing columns a little bit more in depth that we didn't get to do last time. I also know Mark Honecker has been typing a lot of answers to questions that have been showing up in the chat bar, and he's going to continue to do that. I'm going to press on and talk a little bit more about the graphing function. Okay, the graphing function. It is pretty neat, especially if you have any type of a weekly or monthly slide presentation or briefing that you have to prepare for somebody. You can set CRIS up to do your graphs for you. We get questions all the time. Hey, what about the old InfoMaker program? Where did InfoMaker go? Unfortunately, it's gone. But CRIS will do, the new CRIS will do some graphing functions for you. You can start right off by building a graph. For example, I'm going to click the new report icon. I'm going to left click this little plus sign up there on the menu bar. And notice you have some graphing templates. There's bar chart, column chart. There's also a pie chart that's available in there. So if you know ahead of time that this is just going to be a graph or a chart of some kind, you could select that right from the start. However, you can also convert any of your saved reports to a chart. So I'm going to go into My Reports now. This is where all your reports are saved at. So I'm going to left click on the My Reports icon. It takes me into My Reports. If any one of these I could convert by simply right-clicking, and notice I get a Change To option in the menu that comes up. So the Change To option, I can change it to a data sheet, I can change it to a bar chart, column chart, or pie chart. So that gives me the opportunity to change any of those. Okay. I already have one built. It's a DBT query, database transfer, comes out of that perspective. It's a query that we teach as part of our CRIS class, and it gives you your official end-of-month position. So I'm going to right-click on this and edit it so you can see the editing looks just like any CRIS report. So I'm going to take this exercise 9, DBT %obs, right-click, get the little menu, select the edit function. Now when you're editing a graph, it brings you to this funny-looking screen. We'll come back to this in a minute, but what I want to do is actually get to where the data lives. So whenever that happens, you have this Modify button. It's right up there next to the data source window. I'm pointing to it with my cursor. If you left-click that Modify button, then it takes you to your normal CRIS report screen, and this is where you would build your report. Okay. If you would have selected one of the graphing templates from new reports, such as the column chart, for example, it would have brought you right to here. You would select your perspective, click Create, just like we did last month when we built a query from scratch. It would bring you right here, and you would actually build your report. Now, when you're building a graph, a couple of things to think about. The system looks at a two-dimensional graph with an X and Y axis. Your X-axis is going to be your horizontal axis. In other words, all the data values across the bottom of your graph. Your Y-axis is going to be your vertical axis, typically dollar amounts running up and down on the screen on this column chart. And we're using a column chart. CRIS will always get the data elements that you can use there from the layout. So I'm pointing to the layout up here at the top of the screen. So the rule of thumb is if you're building a graph, make sure that whatever you want on your X and Y axis for the graph is in the layout. Whatever dollar values that you might want on the graph need to be in the layout, and whatever other data elements, such as report date or as of date, or if you were doing maybe a TDY graph. You would want to put return date, for example. Make sure all that information is up in the layout as well. We typically tell our students, put as much stuff up in the layout as you think you might possibly need, and that way your graph will cover just about any situation that comes up. The rest of the data elements, the search criteria is like building any other report. You know, I've limited this one down to FY13. I'm going to look at last year's information on this, so I've reduced that to FY13. I'm running a report for the entire year, so it's going from 1 October 2012 all the way to 30 September 2013. Those are the data values I put in for the report date. Now, the database transfer perspective, DBT perspective, is a monthly data feed. So it closes out at the end of every month. So if all goes well, a whole year's worth, I should have 12 report dates that will appear on my data when it comes back. I'm also excluding civilian pay. I've got EAT does not begin with 1 to exclude civilian pay. So if I make any adjustments to this screen, I'm going to go ahead and click the Save button, and that takes me back to my actual graph information. So here's how this chart works. Here's how this screen works. When you first come in here, if you've just created a new graph, you're probably only going to have one data element over here on the left-hand side. And it'll be whichever one is first in your layout as far as dollar values go. This is your y-axis, that vertical axis over here on the left-hand side. Now I have two because I've added one, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. I've got my gross obligated direct, and I've got my annual direct, okay, those two dollar amounts. If I needed to add more columns onto my chart, I could click the Add button. Notice it duplicates the one above it. So now I have two annual directs. The way the screen works, whichever one of these on the left is highlighted, which in other words, whichever one I've clicked on, then the controls on the right-hand side are active for that data element. So where this one says annual direct, and I've kind of highlighted that by dragging the mouse over it, I can change that to any of the values that are in the layout that are a dollar value. Now my layout only has two. It's got the annual direct and the gross obs direct. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete that second or that third data element by right-clicking and going to remove. That's another trick for you too. You can just right-click and remove anything you don't need. But that's how you add different values over there. My x-axis, the axis across the bottom of the screen, the horizontal axis, I've got it set as report date for both of these. Notice when I click the gross ops direct, it says report date, and also when I click the annual direct, the x-axis says report date. Okay? So in other words, I'm going to be looking for report dates across the bottom of the graph. My type of chart is column, and my data source is the DBT. Those two will default depending on what kind of a graph you select. You can also pick which colors you want. So again, whichever one of these is clicked on, so gross obs direct is going to be this particular color here, first one on the top row on the bottom. If I click annual direct, it's the next one right next to it. I'm going to make that a little bit brighter. I'll make it a kind of a bright yellowish color. So I'll just change the color for that one. Okay. I'm going to click Save, and because I did the edit from my reports, it took me right back to my reports. So in order to actually run that graph and to see it, I have to run the report. So I'm just going to left click on it, and it will run, and there are my values right there. It automatically puts a legend on your screen based on your vertical axis, your y-axis. So there's my gross obs direct, it's kind of that greenish color, the yellow being the annual direct. So you can see how my annual direct started off high near the left-hand side. Looks like they took a little bit of money back somewhere around, what is that, January, February. Looks like about April, I got a little spike in my money. Then about May, took some money back. My gross obs started off down here, which would make sense. The very beginning of the fiscal year, I haven't obligated a whole lot of money yet. But as the year went by, you can see I was obligating more and more and more money until right around September 30th, I had obligated just about everything that I had received. Just a tiny little space up there where I didn't obligate quite everything. So that's a typical graph function. I can change this if I don't like the color scheme. Like I said, I can edit it from right here. Just right-click. This works on any CRIS results. You can right-click on the results. You can go back and edit the results. And I'll change this. Maybe I didn't like that bright yellow. I'll make it more of a reddish orange type color. Click Save, and it'll run it again, and it'll apply the new values. Okay. Hovering my mouse over any of the bars will give me the dollar amount. So if you notice on the reddish ones, the reddish kind of orange, depending on your computer monitor settings, it's got the dollar value on top of the bar. That was a selection I made on the graphing screen. My green ones don't. But if I hover my mouse over the green bar, you'll see it pops up a little tag, and it'll say like 11.64 mil. So out of my annual direct of 17.79, I had obligated 11.64. If I go all the way over here to the right, 22 mil, I can hover over the green and notice it's 21.73. So like I said, almost obligated everything that was in my target, my annual target. Okay. Mark, anything to add?
Nope, that's good.
Okay.
Like Christmas.
Like Christmas, almost like Christmas. So that is the graphing function. Now you can export this by right-clicking on the screen. Notice I have some export options. So I can export the data, which is these results right here. The definition is my report, just like we talked about in January's DCO. But I also have an image option. Because this is a graph, I can export the image. I'm going to go ahead and select that image option. My save screen pops up. CRIS remembers where I've been saving things, so I'm in the same folder, my CRIS stuff on my desktop. I've got some options here. Notice I can save it as a PNG. If I click the little drop down, I can save it as a bitmap. I can save it as Excel if I wanted to, so I could actually bring this graph right into Excel. I'm going to go ahead and select bitmap and save the graph as a bitmap. Oops, got to give it a name. %obs graph. I get my little success news banner that pops out there, lets me know, hey Bob, it's saved okay, no errors noted. I'm going to minimize things and go into that folder. There's a little representation of my graph. So I can actually right-click and preview it and bring that up on the screen. Now I'm just looking at a picture of it. I could easily drop this in a PowerPoint presentation or a Word document or anything like that where a graph might be needed. Another neat thing about graphs, if you do save something as a graph, let me get back into CRIS here. And I'll go back to My Reports. So I'm going to left-click the little icon, top right-hand side of the screen. It says My Reports. Left-click that. Here's my %obs graph. It's exercise 9, DBT %obs. I'm going to right-click that and pin it to my dashboard. Back in January, we talked about pinning things to the dashboard and subscribing. So I will pin this to my dashboard, and it will put that graph on my actual CRIS dashboard. There is a limit to the number of tiles on the dashboard. I think it's 24. Isn't that what we discovered, or 14?
14.
14, okay. It's 14 on your dashboard. I'm going to click the CRIS logo, top left-hand corner. If you remember from January, that's the shortcut, the quick way on how to get back to your dashboard. And here is the graph that I just pinned onto my dashboard. So it's there and it's live on the screen. So if I was to exit out of CRIS completely, shut all the way down, you know, go home for the afternoon, come in tomorrow morning, log into CRIS, that graph would be there. Now, because the DBT is a monthly feed, the data is going to be the same. You know, that month, that data is as of the last day of January, and it's not going to update until the end of February, you know, the end of this month. But if you did have other information that you were graphing, it does automatically subscribe to the query when you pin it to the desktop, so your graphs on your dashboard would automatically update for you. And you would see the most latest graph as soon as you log into CRIS, which I think is a pretty handy feature as well. So that takes us really almost to the end point of what I needed to cover. Mark, has there been any questions coming up that we need to go over on the screen? I saw a lot of talk about the snipping tool.
Yeah, they were, you know, asking about printing, and I told them how, you know, they're still working on printing, but one of the guys gave them a real good idea of using snipping tool. And if you're not familiar with the snipping tool, it's a part of the Windows operating system. And, you know, you can Google it, or you can go to YouTube, or you can use the help from Windows. So there's a lot of good information there, but that's a new way to do a print screen.
It is a handy feature, and it's something that we show a lot of our students, mainly because if an error message comes up on the screen, the snipping tool is a real handy way to capture that error message and to send it to the help desk. And I'll talk about that just for a minute. If you go to the little Microsoft ball down in the bottom left-hand corner, it's also called the Start button or Start globe. If you left-click that, you get the typical Windows little pop-up where it lists all your programs and stuff like that. If you start typing in snipping, like the word snip, you will see the snipping tool appear in that list. You can see it on my screen, and then by clicking that, this little box opens up, and you don't have to do anything to it. It automatically defaults to new. Your cursor changes to that little plus sign. I'm not sure if you can see that out there in DCO land or not, because you're probably seeing the standard DCO cursor. But you just left-click and drag anywhere on the screen, and it will capture in the snipping tool that area. So now I have that captured. You can write on it if you need to. Put a little message out there, and then you can save that. You can send it to the help desk. You can highlight things if you need to. So it's a very handy feature. We won't charge you guys any extra for that, so that's a freebie. Back to CRIS. Probably a big problem that people run into and that trips me up a lot is making sure to select your role if you have multiple roles in CRIS. So I'm going to go to New Report. I'm just going to left-click the New Report tile on my screen. And let's say I was going to create a new report as a data sheet. So I will left-click Data Sheet tile. Have to select my perspective. I'll just pick one of the common ones, PSR. Say I was going to do my status of funds or something like that. Click Create. Give it a title up there in the top. Bob's PSR SOF for status of funds. But right under the title, and this doesn't jump out at you very much, mine says AFRC View All. I have many different roles in CRIS. We get a lot of calls into the help desk that, hey, my query's not running right, or I'm not seeing the data that I was supposed to be seeing. Many times that comes from the role not being the proper role. So if you've got more than one role, then you'll see this little drop-down arrow right under the title, and you'll have to click it and be sure and select the appropriate role. You might have Civ payrolls, for example, or a MAGCOM view all, and then maybe another role that limits you to a specific unit within the MAGCOM. So if you're looking at MAGCOM all data, but you have that unit selected, then you're not going to be getting the full picture. So, okay, we just got an exercise notice. Let me acknowledge that and close that out.
We'll be here a while, Bob.
Yeah. Okay, so that does trip a lot of people up. So make sure you select the proper role. Once you build the report and save it, then it will save the role with it. So the next time you run the report, you don't have to select your role again. If you export it and re-import it, you don't have to select the role again. Where the role might mess you up on an already built report is if you were to email a friend of yours and say, hey, do you have a good report on open documents? And they email you their report, they could have different roles in CRIS than you have. So when you open up their report, you'd probably have to select your roles because theirs wouldn't even be there. It might be blank, or it might give an error until you select a report. Okay? So that's what you might have to do as well. Anything else we need to address, Mark?
Well, somebody just asked from the 460th, is there something I can pull into my report that reflects gross OBS as a percent of annual direct?
As a percent of annual direct. Yeah.
Exercise 9?
Let me go back to my reports. This graph is actually a percent obligated, so I'm gonna convert that so it's not a graph. I'm actually going to convert it into something else. So I'm going to change to Q. And here it is as a Q. I'm going to go ahead and run that. And it brings me back to here. I'll left click and run it to actually get results. And I'm going to look at this in the collapsed form. Now, here's a catch. And let me expand this so you can see it a little bit better out there. Okay, we're looking at, and this could be done for a daily report. You know, this monthly report is in the DBT, any type of a report, if you needed like your percent obligated. And this is what we're calculating right here. Now, there is a percent, an annual percent OBS direct data element in CRIS, and it's not working right now. They had the same problem in Info Analyst. They had it fixed in the new CRIS, and now it's broke again. So this column that I've highlighted on the screen is supposed to be my percent obligated of annual direct. As you can see, it's not correct. It's saying, you know, 535%, 349%. There's some stuff going on, and those are negative percentages, by the way. There's some stuff going on behind the scenes that is not correct. So CRIS allows you to build a custom data element, and I'll actually show you the one that I built for this one. So I've got Bob's percent obligated here on the far right-hand side. So we can see that at the end of October, I was 10.17% obligated. End of November, I was 16.38. If I scroll down through here, 72%, 80%. I actually finished up the year right here on September 30th at 98.77% obligated compared to my annual direct. So those data elements do exist in CRIS. You can bring those into the layout and use them. Just remember that the percent annual direct CRIS one is broken. Let me edit this, and I'll show you the one that I've done. I'll have to get back to 100% here. Here's your percent data elements. They show up in your data element column, and there's all kinds of percentage calculations. You know, your commitments, annual TOA, total obligation authority. There's the obligated annual direct that's not working right now. There's one for reimbursements, just all kinds of percentages calculations. I actually used this little plus icon, top left-hand corner of the screen. My mouse is pointing at it right now. That is the option that allows you to build a custom data element. So by left-clicking on that, you get a blank screen. It allows you to type in a name. That's where I typed in Bob's percent obligated. And then you can build your calculation down here by just dragging in data elements. So what I did, I had like, you know, I brought in like annual direct, drug that over there, and, you know, divided it by gross obs, or, you know, vice versa, whatever, multiplied it by 100 to get the percent. Let me cancel this, and I'll actually show you my data element. When you create a custom data element, it appears in your data element list. So if I type in Bob's over here, you'll see it in my data element list. I just drug it in the layout, and there it is, top right-hand side of the layout. You get that little pencil icon, and that pencil means that it's a custom data element, and the percent sign means that I'm calculating a percentage. I can actually right-click on it and go to Modify, and you'll actually see the blank screen, the same as if I had clicked that plus icon. This is the screen that I showed you just a minute ago. It's where I typed in my title. I started it off with 100 times and then a math calculation. And that way the system knew that it was a percentage, and it was able to put that percent icon up there. But I just took 100 times gross obs divided by annual direct, and that gives me my percentage obligated of annual direct. So, you know, that was a good question. Those percent data elements are there. Unfortunately, as I said, one of them's not working right now. I'm not sure about the others. I have not tested them all, but you can create your own custom data element. So that was good to show in this particular training session today. And you can make these custom data elements as complicated as you want. You have, you know, addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division. So all the different operators there. You can bring in as many data elements as you need to, and get as creative as you want in creating your own custom data elements. So appreciate that question. And that brings us up to about 10 minutes before the top of the hour, which is pretty close when we were supposed to end the training. So we've got just the last few little minutes. I would like to encourage you to sign up for the Worldwide that's coming up. The link is there on your screen. And I know those folks there at Washington, at the Pentagon, and Zama and her folks would be really glad if you do that. There's going to be some great speakers. I've seen the speaker list and some of the emails. So that would be a truly valuable experience if you guys can sign up for that. If you need some additional CRIS training, or just about any of the common FM systems such as wide area workflow or ABSS, we can help you with that here at the AFISO. You can go out to the FMDLC and sign up for that. Mark, could you put that link in there real quick?
FMDLC?
fm.csd.dis.
I did earlier.
Oh, okay. Mark did earlier. He'll put it in there. If you've got suggestions or problems with CRIS, please contact our help desk. I'll give you the help desk information. Their DSN phone number is 596, and I'll put this in the chat box also, 596-5645. It's their DSN, help desk 596 5645. They also have a commercial number. It's 334-416-5645. And I put that in there as well. If you are having problems with a specific query, the help desk is going to want you to send them a copy of the query. So make sure you do the export function and export definition to get the report file, and then you can email that to the email address the help desk will give you, and that way somebody can take a look at that query and try and resolve that for you. Okay? I do not have anything else. Mark, anything from your end?
A couple guys are asking about grouping data elements, and yes, you can group data elements. Obviously, we've run out of time here, but if you look in our training guide that we have out available for CRIS, that's out on our SharePoint, then exercise, what is it, Bob, 6 or 7?
6, I believe.
Exercise
travel query
talks about grouping. So if you just follow it along in exercise 6, you'll be able to group any of your data elements. It's a little tricky, but not too bad. Let's see, and then a couple of guys are still asking about, are you going to be able to find this webinar recorded somewhere, and that will be available. It's in your chat window, I guess on your CE resources. So it's been posted out there a couple times. So
yes, just scroll up. So.
Yeah, just scroll up in your chat window, and you can see where they posted it out there for you.
Okay, I don't have anything else, and we're done. So, Zama, it's back to you.
Mr. Arrington, this is Roger Vick. I just want to thank you and Mark so much for the training over both sessions. I did a quick head count, and you've trained over 730 people, or at least in both sessions. That's the total count, so many thanks for that, and the information on CRIS. I know people in the CE community were clamoring for it, and we sincerely appreciate you and Mark being responsive and taking time out of your busy schedule to enlighten us on many aspects of CRIS training. You talked about the RA Worldwide. We have 896 people signed up for that, and we're going to offer CRIS again in that training. So if you didn't get anything here, contact them on the help desk, and stay tuned for the Worldwide. And again, many thanks for your sacrifice of your time and the training you offer over 730 people these last couple of sessions. So we're out here, and again with our gratitude. Thanks again.
Sure thing. Take it easy.